John chapter 5, verse 1. Now, I want to kind of review for a second where we are. I call this first section of John chapter 5, Christ's power over human hopelessness. But it begins a new section in John's development in his gospel. From John chapter 1 through the end of John chapter 4, we have what Mr. Tenney says in that book I asked you to get, to read about it, John, the Gospel of Belief. I believe he summarized it very well. The first section, as he said, is the period of consideration. And so during that period, Jesus was being presented, and he was, through the various witnesses to him and through his works and things, he was presenting himself to Israel as to who he is. And everyone was considering. There was no hostility at the time. Everybody was considering and evaluating what he said, what he did, and so forth. And it's like, I believe, Nicodemus summarized in John chapter 3. He was the teacher of Israel. He was the greatest teacher in Israel. And he came to Jesus by night, and he said, Master, we know that you must be a teacher who's come from God, for no one can do the miracles that you're doing unless God is with him. So he came to the correct decision as everyone considered Jesus. But he hadn't taken a further step. But now that we come to John chapter 5, and John chapter 5 and chapter 6 will be the period of controversy, the reaction to Jesus' words, to his teachings, and to his claims are now going to heat up. This is the section where Jesus really throws his gauntlet into the arena. And of course, leading the controversy against him are all the religious leaders, virtually all of them. And they stir up the people to be in indecision. But Jesus' purpose in this new period is to force people to evaluate what he's saying, to evaluate what he is doing, and to come to a personal decision about those facts, about him personally. And Jesus will always do this. And even in our life, we go through a period where we hear about him, and there's a period of consideration and so forth. But Jesus will do something to force you to come to a decision about him personally. And that's what he does in this section. As a matter of fact, it's very exciting as you look at the things he presses here, because he's going to force people to decide whether he is a deceiver sent from hell, or whether he is a psychotic who is an egomaniac and has deceived himself into thinking that he's God, or he's going to bring them to see that he must be who he claims to be. God manifest in the flesh, the promised Messiah, the Son of God. Now those are the only three possibilities that Jesus leaves to anyone because of what he said, what he did, and what he claimed. If people try to wiggle out of a real decision about Jesus, as most, by the way, of the so-called pastors of the church today try to do, to say, well, Jesus was a great teacher. He was a great prophet. But he wasn't the Son of God. He wasn't God. And you hear that all the time. And, of course, before every Easter and before every Christmas, the wackos come out of the woodwork They call themselves, what is it, the Jesus Seminar? Yeah, the Jesus Seminar, and you'll see them featured in the Godless Time magazine, the Godless Newsweek magazine, Godless everything else, and give them plenty of space. And they'll come out with their new theories about why Jesus never claimed to be God, and and why we can't believe the Scripture. It was dreamed up by people hundreds of years later, and so forth. I always wonder how they can come up with that, since you try to find another book like the Bible that creates a character like Jesus Christ, and you can't find one. There's nothing like it. So what we have to conclude is that a bunch of nondescript people hundreds of years later